Nintendo is a company that has more secrets than the CIA, the FBI, and all the other 3-letter acronyms combined. And Did You Know Gaming is essentially a YouTube channel that is the Library of Alexandria, except instead of burning all of the books, they get YouTube subscribers and a ton of views for showing a ton of cool facts that you didn't know. Today we've got a full hour, an hour of stuff that you've never heard of before from Nintendo games you've never seen that'll blow your mind and make you think, oh, I was an idiot before, but now I am smart.
The Game Boy Advance has so many good games on it, and they even managed to outlast the console that they were made for. Thanks to Nintendo's keen interest in backwards compatibility for their handheld systems, the Nintendo DS gave players access to not just the newest DS titles, but they could continue to enjoy the backlog of games released for the GBA.
Wow, that's a good idea. Wow, they came up with that idea how long ago? Nintendo putting older games onto newer consoles. If only we could do something like that nowadays, where we put old games on newer consoles. Oh, but we do have that, except we decided, for whatever reason, to put like 0 Pokemon games on the Switch, which is mind-boggling to me.
A godsend for many, particularly those strapped for cash, as having a new system that could play older games means that the legacy of some of the Game Boy Advance's most iconic titles could live on with those who have a tight budget.
Oh well, guess you gotta emulate. What's that? You wanna play Pokemon Fire Reds and you don't have a piece of machinery that is 7 billion years old? Oops, gotta emulate. Nintendo, you're making us emulate. What's going on? You gotta have to fix that.
Who was simply curious about the past. They could try out great games like WarioWare, Castlevania Circle of the Moon, Fire Emblem, Zelda the Minish Cap and Four Swords, Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, and even
interesting.
Pokemon Pinball spin-off. These are just some of the titles we'll be talking about in this episode, with our first splash landing in the world of microgame mania. WarioWare
Oh no, WarioWare.
Micro Games was a pretty
Wario deserves to be on a list of some sort.
library of games, giving him his own incredibly distinct cast of supporting characters, and leaving players with no mistakes that Wario is a comedic element.
Quick, if Wario was arrested and jailed, what would he be charged for? I'm thinking possession of some
The
things.
Mario franchise. That humor can be
He's on
found
the no-fly
throughout
list.
WarioWare,
Absolutely is.
and ranges from being on the nose to being pretty well hidden, such as one reference that requires some extra effort one may not think to put in. After clearing the first set of Wario's microgames, the player can then play them again endlessly. Doing so means that the player can repeatedly beat the boss of this stage, which will present them with a short
Bro, who is this
animation
Galactus?
of Wario resting on a sofa watching TV. It's actually possible for the player to turn the TV on during this animation by pressing the A button, revealing what Wario is watching. After beating the boss on the 3rd difficulty cycle, the word
Bro's watching the
"Thank you for
news."
playing appears instead of rest. And by turning on the TV, a smartly dressed businessman with glasses will be revealed. Though
I've seen this episode of Pornhub
this
before.
isn't, of course, just any businessman. It is, in fact, the great iconic visage of the late Nintendo president Satoru Iwata.
Never mind, it's the GOAT! It's the GOAT! Let's go! That's my hero! Woo! That's the GOAT!
But this isn't the game's only secret. Another reference comes in during the staff roll, which lets the player change the shape of stars that fly past the screen through button inputs. If the player pressed down the down button on the game's controller, the stars will turn into small Triforces from the Legend of Zelda series, while pressing the right direction.
I can't wait for the next game theory. This is why WarioWare is canon in The Legend of Zelda. But hey.
They changed them into the GameCube logo instead. Another series that made quite the impression on GBA is Konami's Castlevania series, and Circle of the Moon has its own reference to another, earlier title released by the publisher, though this time around, some players may have never even known the game they were referencing. A wearable item dropped by the skeleton medalist is the Bear Ring, a ring which the game describes as holding the Curse of the Bear. It may appear to be a rather useless
What is the curse of the bear? That you have to hibernate? That you have to sleep for 6 months at a time? That you have to be big and fluffy? Wait, are they talking like bear in an animal sense? Or bear as in the big hairy man sense? Where you just turn into a big hairy man?
all, providing them with a loss
With
of
a big
one
belly.
strength, defense, intelligence, and luck.
Wouldn't be
suggesting
nearly
the
as
player
cool.
Shouldn't use it for lack of any real benefit. However, If the player does equip this item at the same time as activating the dual setup combination of Pluto and Black Dot,
Big hairy man.
rather than the usual effect of turning into a skeleton, they will instead turn into a cartoonish green bear called
Did he just shit his own children? What is this?
Bear Tank is actually a character that appeared in an earlier Konami title, Rakuga Kids, a 2.5D fighting game released for the Nintendo 64
Oh my
in
days.
1998. We actually covered
Bro, no, lock these characters up immediately. Whoever made this game, lock him up in prison too. There's clearly something not right in his head.
Do want to check it out. The game was only ever published in Japan and PAL territories, so he's
Dude,
not
what is the red thing doing?
US audiences, but he has made appearances in other Konami titles as well.
He's like the superhero of the sex offenders
including
list.
Konami Crazy Racers for GBA. This transformation in Circle of the Moon is considered to actually still be pretty useless, as though it does have some unique and rather interesting attacks, his damage is still well below that of Nathan's human form, and he will die in just a single blow. In reality,
But he
this
has kids
item
though,
is
so that's
nothing
fun.
more than a joke, but as a lover of the bear tank, you can't say it's an unwelcome one. Another
No,
series of
that's
games
very
which have
unwelcome. I can say it. I'll say it. Hello, hi. That's very
little
unwelcome.
acknowledgement overseas is the legendary Starfy series, probably as a result of most of the games in the series never getting an international release.
That's so sad. There are so many games out there that look sick that are only released in Japan. Like, most of the Yokai Watch games didn't even come out in English. Even though people were coming out like, Yokai Watch is gonna be the Pokemon killer. It's so sick. And they released like, what, 2, 3 Yokai Watch games? I don't think they even released the Yokai Watch Switch game outside of Japan. And it looks really decent. Maybe not great, but like it looked pretty decent. And it's always good for a series to have a competitor as well.
First game, Densetsu no Starfy, originally began its life being developed for the Game Boy all the way back in 1995, before eventually having development moved to the Game Boy Color in 1998, before it was shifted once again, shortly before its completion, to the new GBA hardware in 1999. Because of all of these shifts in the game's long production,
The main character of this game just looks like something that Mario would consume to get a power-up.
it wasn't even released until 2002, a 7-year development period.
I love that if that was the entire point of the game, was to just get to a point, the final cutscene of the game, when you beat the final boss, is you get launched to an area where you just sit inside of a block until Mario comes and uses you as a power-up for 30
The series
seconds.
as a whole wouldn't have any release in the West at
Thanks,
all
Starfy.
until the 5th entry on the Nintendo DS, released as the legendary Starfy.
It looks like a B-Tech
One
Kirby.
of Starfy's adventures on the GBA did have some recognizable faces in it. In Densetsu no Starfy 3, Wario himself is prominently featured within the game's 8th world.
What are you doing here,
giving
mate?
them treasures such as a copy of WarioWare Inc. with an actual GBA, and teaching Starfy how to use
The treasures, such as a copy of WarioWare Inc. Oh, I'm here to give you treasure! It's my video game! Play it, please! We have 5 players so far!
shooting star ability. Moving from an obscure franchise to a huge one, Nintendo had a pretty rocky start with its international adoption of the Fire Emblem franchise. Even when Fire Emblem The Blazing Blade managed to be localized around the globe, it still found itself in a spot of bother, with every version of the game having its own unique error.
I love it when British people do the commentary for these videos and they just put the British colloquialisms in. It seems to have found itself in somewhat of a spot of bother. For you see, there were some tremendous bad things that happened to it.
In their dialogue. In the original Japanese version, Lyn as a Blade Lord will incorrectly be shown using her regular battle sprites and animations if she is wielding the Soul Katai, as a result of the animations being assigned to Durandal. This error was fixed when the game was localized elsewhere, but other issues will crop up instead. With the North American release of the game, all dialogue mentioning Aenir has some sort of translation error, with the character sometimes being referred to as a location instead of a person. One
Are you going to Daniel? Yes, I'll be on my way to David now. So long. It'll take me 7 Stevens to get there.
straight up says, Daddy has to go to Aenir. I'm going to get Mummy. But the issue
Okay, that makes sense though. I am going I am going to David. I am going to King. Okay, it doesn't really make sense.
Don't just stop there, as the English language mode of both European releases adds its own unusual error on the world map sequence of chapter 16XE or 17XH, where the game's script will suddenly drop to English language in place of Italian.
No. This is I can translate this. I am 5% Italian. In Rota per la Costa in Sui di Calen. That means in Rotten per la Costa, which is a coffee shop in the UK. Costa Coffee is a place. The Sud Soap de Calen. There is de Calen. There you go. Translate.
This mistake isn't that the game suddenly points the game to read from the Italian language script instead, but rather it is part of the English text, as it even occurs in another release of the game in Europe, which didn't actually include an Italian language option.
Okay, I know exactly why this happened. The translators woke up one day, boom, they can only think and speak in Italian. Some kind of weird brain hemorrhage, can no longer translate English, they can only translate Italian, feeling a little bit awkward, they still go into work. It's like one of those sitcom episodes where they have to try and make do with the situation that they're in. So they just try to translate the game into Italian, hoping that no one will ever notice.
Fire Emblem may be huge these days, but
there's some laughs and japes, everyone has a good time. No harm done.
Zelda. Unused code is always fun to unearth in games, and one particularly fun game is the Minish Cap. Lon Lon Milk makes an appearance in this pocket adventure.
Sorry, is your hat a bird?
Only to heal the player out in the field, but it seems as though there may have been another function for this item entirely in earlier builds. Unused data suggests that, at least at one stage, Link would have been able to churn Lon Lon Milk into
He's
butter
so
with a chunk
small!
of unused text which reads, "Your Lon Lon Milk turned into butter. It's very fresh and delicious." With that said, the
butter.
conditions required to turn the milk into butter aren't
My favorite part of Zelda is when Link takes a big bite out of a chunk of butter.
obvious, but it would seem likely that Link was supposed to have taken the Lon Lon milk to a particular character to have it churned, but who that is isn't all too clear. It's possible that
You don't
they
ask
too
who the
were
butter
also
churner is. The butter churner asks who you is.
before the game's final release, but one Minish found in the Minish village can produce Picolite for Link, a substance that increases the rate of finding certain items. To create a variety of different colors of Picolite and make them available for Link to purchase, the player must bring them the correct ingredients, with one of these ingredients being Lon Lon Milk, in order to unlock yellow Picolite. This is a particularly interesting item to have to deliver, as it isn't particularly hard to come by, unlike the rest of the items needed for the other colors. So it may be that in an early version of the game, Link would have had to churn Lon Lon Milk into Lon Lon Butter and deliver it to unlock yellow Picolite instead. The Minish Cap also has many connections with another Zelda title.
Zelda, you've got to save the land! You've got to defeat Ganondorf! What are you doing? He's churning. I'm sorry! I need to churn the Lon Lon milk into butter so I can get the Picolite! Oh, alright, Link. I'm sure this is a very important part of your quest.
Yay, 4 Swords. One of the new enemies created for 4 Swords was the rather irritating Rupee Wraith, a ghost-like creature that pursues Link after being let out of its treasure chest hiding spot. Rather than take out Link's health, the Wraith instead starts to drain the player's rupee count. But the Rupee Wraith actually makes another appearance in the Minish Cap.
He's snatching my coin!
Entirely, sharing a sprite with the ghost which haunts Greagle.
Wait, is he sucking him up? Hold on, is that Luigi's Mansion I'm seeing there? He's sucking up a ghost with some kind of hoover. That is Luigi Mansion.
The Wraith's squealing sounds can also be heard in the Minish Cap, having been given to the big Octorok boss. But other data from 4 Swords appears in the Minish Cap, though goes entirely unused. Both Zols and Gels appear to have been considered for the game at some stage, but they remain dormant in Minish Cap's data.
Why are slimes in every single Japanese game? It's like Dragon Quest created the idea of a slime, and then every single Japanese game developer looked at that one. Do that one. We need slimes. We need slime in there. Is there a slime Pokemon? I guess Goomy counts, right?
Tidbit comes from the Zol boss of 4 Swords. An interesting part of this boss comes in its name, Derazol, with Dera appearing to be a shortening of Durai, a Japanese word for immense or awesome, meaning this boss's name essentially translates into awesome.
Oh, Ditto, yeah, Ditto, Generation 1.
Also has an interest.
What is it about slimes, specifically? Is there there like a slime fetish going around?
Name, originating from the term bomba rosa, which, when translated from Italian, means red bomb, though this name is only used in the game's English localization. In fact, not only is this name used in the game's English releases, but the Italian translation of the game actually uses the original Japanese name, Bombu, possibly to obscure the enemy's name from being a bit too obvious to Italian speakers.
Some names sound so much better when you say them in other languages. Like, you could have Charizard. I mean, Charizard sounds pretty sick, but then you can also have Lizardon. It's pretty sick. The video that I recorded with Vinny is to do with Japanese names, and some of the Japanese names sound so sick for the Pokemon that just don't deserve really cool names.
Now, the Game Boy Advance's Pokemon offerings
Ditto is not called
massive
Ligma in
success,
Japanese.
like it had before, and as it would continue to do. But before we dive into those mainline titles, let's take a look at a spin-off that sold well in its own right. Many have fond memories of playing Pokemon Pinball, Ruby and Sapphire on their GBAs in the early 2000s.
Did they put Pokemon Pinball in arcades? Because they should have.
A great deal, with the game selling around 1 million units worldwide. But
that's not bad! 1 million units for a pinball game? That's pretty sick!
This game, a
That's really impressive, actually.
Exclusive experience that only a few got to try. At least one full-size pinball machine based on the game was produced by Personal Pinball Inc. for Pokemon USA. It was ultimately housed at the New York Pokemon Center, and Personal Pinball was so proud of it, they featured it on their company flyer. This physical version seems to take elements from both boards featured in the GBA game. As for the game that this pinball spin-off is based on, Ruby and Sapphire...
Oh, dude, this ad was one of the craziest ads of all time. They really got people to dress up like this.
Surging presence in 2020 as well, all thanks to a pair of fish.
You know these people aren't playing Pokemon. That guy is in my night terrors. The Duskull kid, he appears at the end of every nightmare.
In May 2020, a Japanese live streamer...
Oh, they're gonna talk about the fish! I've made multiple videos on this fish. This fish completed Pokemon, but not only did that, it discovered glitches, it found shinies, it revolutionized the Pokemon world. This fish is insane.
Began a lengthy series using his two pet Siamese fighting fish to play through Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire.
Fighting fish? Can you do fish fighting in the same way that you do like dog fighting? Or is that not a thing? I like to imagine that fish go at it by just like waggling their fins at each other until one of them gives up and dies.
Using a system involving several programs connected to the game's emulator. These programs rely on a webcam to track the fish's movements and determine what individual action to perform by where it swims over a map placed behind the fish tank. So, wherever the fish swims, it blocks a map square with a picture of a controller input on it, and the system performs said input in-game. On October 3rd, 2020...
No, you can really do fighting fish, like dog fights? No. First off, you shouldn't do dog fights. That's very gross and bad.
During a live stream of Pokemon Sapphire, one of the fish was working on a boulder puzzle in the C4
It's the glitch moment.
On Route 128, when it performed a very rare glitch that appeared to have not been...
It just duplicates the stone, and it makes it impossible to progress. How did a fish do this?
...known in the past. The fish used strength on a boulder, which moved it, and additionally created a duplicate boulder in its place.
So basically what this means is that companies from now on are going to start replacing QA teams with an elaborate system of animals that can then create every single situation in a video game. It's like the saying, if you had 50,000 monkeys in a room, how long would it take them to recreate the works of Shakespeare? They're going to try that with fish
making the puzzle
for video games.
Unsolvable until the room was reset. The streamer later figured out how to trigger the glitch himself and uploaded a step-by-step guide to YouTube on how to perform it. Amazingly, another fish that belonged to the owner found another glitch a few months later. This time, the glitch happened during...
Does this guy just have hyper-intelligent fish?
Where the player picked up an item through a wall.
Wait, they are fighting each other. I swear to God, they are fighting each other there. Look, if you look on this, it looks like they're like going after each other.
Through a wall.
What the hell is that?
The Game Boy was revolutionary. It took gaming on the go and it had some killer games to boot. The only real problems with the system was that it wasn't exactly pocket friendly and you couldn't see the screen if you had no external lighting. This is often riffed on, but it seems a pretty glaring issue with the system, and viewing the Game Boy games through a modern lens really paints the experience in a different light.
The Game Boy not having a backlight was one of the biggest challenges that I faced as a child. When I went to bed, I would try and play my Game Boy, but the fact that it didn't have a backlight, those Nintendo DS kids, or those Game Boy SP kids, for example, I had to sit there and turn the light on, which was big danger. It was like playing a mini game where you have to try and stealth level 100 yourself past your parents while turning the light on and off at specific intervals while making sure to be hyper vigilant and hyper alert on your hearing so you know when the opponents are coming, and then pretending to be asleep when they come into your room. I played that mini game so much I became an expert at it. It's like my hearing became 10 times stronger when I was in bed.
But regardless, the games were solid, and Nintendo's first-party offerings were quite remarkable, all things considered. Mario's Picross, Donkey
There's a
Kong
WarioWare
Land,
minigame of
Metroid
that? Is
2,
there really?
Link's Awakening,
That's awesome.
And Pokemon Gold and Silver demonstrated that great products can come in compact sizes, if you consider the OG Game Boy to actually be compact, that is. The experiences of these games may have been limited by hardware, but their design...
It's like FNAF. Yes. Okay. Yes. My childhood experiences is FNAF. It's like
was
FNAF.
top-notch, meaning that they continue to see relevance in later years, with Metroid 2 even getting a full remake treatment for the 3DS in 2017. But the idea of remaking the game was much older than that. With the original Game Boy releasing back in the early 90s, Retro Studios had considered remaking the game as early as the mid-2000s. Ben Sprout, an artist with Retro Studios, posted on his WordPress blog in 2009 in response to a Metroid 2 fan remake of the game being released online, stating, "I've always thought it would be awesome to remake Metroid 2. A group of us at Retro even discussed doing it as a side project at one point. Nothing ever came of it, though I still think it'd be fun to remake it as a 3D side-scroller."
This is how you know the difference between game developers that genuinely love what they do and game developers that are just spaffing out mobile games with microtransactions because it's like the cheapest and easiest way to make money. Could you imagine someone asked the developer of like Candy Crush, "Hey, would you like to remake Candy Crush?" They wouldn't be like, "Oh man, I'd be so excited to remake Candy Crush. It was a real passion project." Or maybe Candy Crush was, but some of these like dumb mobile games with a ton of microtransactions, like what's the biggest flop of the century so far? It would be like asking a developer of Aliens Colonial Marines, "Do you want to come back and make a remake of this?" They would be like, "Absolutely not, brother.
Another
No
name
shot."
which appears in Metroid 2's credits is Dylan Cuthbert, widely recognized for his work as the main programmer on the original Star Fox released for the Super Nintendo. In Metroid 2, he receives a name drop under the Special Thanks section, which, according to Cuthbert in a 2016 interview, is thanks to the work he did assisting the team, providing programming advice, and helping with the game's optimization while he was working on his own title, X, also released for the Game
X?
Boy.
How do you copyright the name X? How do you make it so no one else can use the name X?
Speaking of which, X is an important game in and of itself. In order for Dylan to create X, his team at Argonaut had to create their own Game Boy development kit, a task that was not so simple to achieve. According to Dylan,
Oh, and this is what
we
they came out
had
with?
a Game Boy development kit with a camera pointed at the Game Boy. They got
What?
it into circuit printing and were printing the circuit boards in this bath full of acid. We're not
Bro, what? They're like jury rigging some kind of Breaking Bad scenario just to make a video game? What's going on?
certain, but X may well be the only game that came to be partly thanks to a bathtub full of acid. Our next
Jesus
Game Boy
Christ.
title is Mario's Picross, a great little puzzle game which stood the test of time. This is another Nintendo title that had a whole bunch of changes when it was brought to the West. These
This is everyone that says, actually, Darkrai is a mythical Pokemon and not a legendary. This is everyone that replies on Twitter and corrects, like, a typo instead of just responding to your actual tweet.
changes when it was brought to the West. These included a number of changes to the puzzles, altering what the player must draw out on the Picross boards. One of these was the alteration for a puzzle featuring a picture of a cocktail drink, which was changed into that of a Boo character from the Mario series, essentially changing Boos into a Boo. It seems Nintendo's main focus was on removing references to alcohol, like with another puzzle that was changed from a glass of wine into a hat, or a mug of beer that was turned into a crow. References to the Buddhist religion were also removed by
course.
placing a Buddhist
What?
bell with some garlic. A similar change happens with
Okay, I understand them getting rid of alcohol from a children's game. Why did they get rid of the references to Buddhism? Buddhism is like the most low-key kind of, yeah, man, whatever, just go with the flow, you're kind of good. Religion that is out there. There is no religion that is more chill. Maybe like the Sikhs, maybe they're more chill, I'm not sure.
seems to be a Buddhist guardian, Neo. being swapped out with chili peppers. References to Japanese culture were also changed to more universally recognized images, with the removal of a Japanese tea kettle for a much more recognizable burger. And
What? That was a burger? Bro, I couldn't recognize
change of a
that.
hand drum and yokai to popular animals. Another puzzle was changed to remove a cigarette, which is a surprising image to include in the first place, considering it's a game for all ages. Other changes include a toy puzzle having been turned into a unicorn, and despite efforts to distance the game from religious iconography, a fan puzzle was turned into an angel.
Oh, it's the Christians. They came out, the Christian fundamentalists. They came out in force. Like, listen, if you're in America, you got to do what American do. An
Also,
American
just
go
wanted to quickly say that
church.
we're giving away a Nintendo Switch OLED edition on our second channel. There's details on that in the description. And we're also moving a lot of the sort of trivia you'll find in these extra videos over to TikTok, so be sure to give us a follow using the links in the video description. Now, back to the trivia. When it comes to creating a new title for the Game Boy, it makes sense to work on a game specifically designed for pocket adventures, with inspirations coming from games on home consoles. However, while Donkey Kong Land wound up being an entirely unique game in its own right, the original plan was for the game to be a straight-up port of one of the SNES's most graphically impressive titles, Donkey Kong Country. Programmer
One day
Paul
I'm gonna
Mahachek,
play Donkey
however,
Kong Country.
managed to convince
I've never
higher-ups
played a
at
Donkey Kong
Rare
game
that
before.
a new
I'm gonna do it one day.
original title
I will
would make
become
more
Monkey.
financial sense, saying, "Whenever anyone asked me to convert a console game onto Game Boy, I expressed the opinion that we'd be better off writing a new game in the same vein, and that the extra resources to do that wouldn't be much greater than for doing a port, whilst not limiting
Base,
your market
true.
and reducing its size to those people who hadn't just bought the console game." It was a point of view I expressed in 1994 when I was asked to port DKC and instead wrote DKL for Game Boy.
Paul is so smart. Why make old game when new game do trick? And also, everyone can buy new game. Such a good idea. Based
Was
Paul.
also a sentiment that Cranky Kong would get behind, as Donkey Kong Land's manual expressed the whole game was made after Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong had a bet with Cranky that they could have fun even without fancy graphics and modern music. Despite this point, however, the original Donkey Kong Country was given a
That sounds like a conversation that would happen. Hey, Cranky Kong, I bet that we can have fun without modern music and graphics. What? What are you saying? Graphics? The hell is a graphic? What? Where's the TV remote?
port to the handheld's mid-generation upgrade, the Game Boy Color, albeit a whole 5 years after Donkey Kong Land. Another one of Donkey Kong Land's secrets is that the game was originally going to feature a new animal buddy called Rambunctious. Little is
these
known
the
about
graphics
what this
of
little
the
fellow
game?
could do
What's
and
going
why
on?
he never made it into the game, just that they were, a ram. Maybe they
You couldn't fit in the game. You seen the size of those horns? You got stuck in the
were
door.
just a little bit sheepish. Hearing from developers who worked on our favourite games gives us some great insight into game creation, a job which for many may seem like a dream come true until you find yourself on the other side. The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening was a game that certainly delivered joy to many players, but in the files from the Giga Leaks a couple of years ago, a
The
development
Giga
note
Leaks?
from one of the game's
Jesus Christ, what did they put in the Giga Leaks? Did they leak like entire games? What a name. Yes, get ready. The Giga Leaks are dropping.
programmers revealed some more sentiments around their work at Nintendo over the years. Left by programmer Kazuaki Morita, the note titled Bearded Uncle goes on to talk about his experience working with Nintendo and his thoughts as he moves forward in his career. It reads, "I think there are jobs game developers will never forget, in the same way that people who fish remember their first catch, regardless of its size. For me, it's Super Mario Bros. It had a huge 32 kilobyte programming area for the time, and I packed in nearly that much. It was a big fuss, even if you had a few free bytes. Then the Infinite Lives, the Minus World.
Did you just compare like catching a small fish to working on Super Mario Brothers?
I think the word tricks started being used around this time. I'm relieved they're not always called bugs. It's been about 8 years since then, and I've been involved in various other games, but as I get older, I feel my head is spinning and my memory is weakening. However,
Jesus
I think
Christ.
that my slyness has been only further enhanced. It is
This is like a diary that you'd read in Oblivion about an assassin that is plotting their next kill.
often said that a programmer's life is up to 30 years long, but that's just a social custom. Saying it happens because you don't have to work, when really it's that you are unable to work. And I think
Oh
I
my
might
God.
quit this job if I feel I've reached my limit, since there's no such thing as a programmer who cannot program.
Jesus Christ, Japan's work culture is insane. My God, he's talking about himself like he's some kind of thing that can be used up and thrown away. That's so sad. That poor fella.
You may be pleased to hear that Kazuaki would stick with Nintendo for many years after Link's Awakening was released, mostly sticking to work on the Zelda franchise as a programmer, though in recent years taking on more roles.
Well, if he's felt like that, it's not really like good ending, to be honest. Like, yeah, he might have stayed there, but what if his mindset didn't change? His mindset was exactly the same. That's not good.
Supervisor, possibly starting to feel his age when it comes to his programming tricks. What would a variety of Nintendo
Also, yeah, that was never meant to be seen. Damn, it was just put in a video. That's crazy.
games be without the mention of Pokemon? Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal came after Red and Blue, so players were of course
really?
expecting some riveting new features to their grand adventure. It turns out that there was a feature set to change the game's immersive experience, giving the player a sense of being in the Pokemon world, but it was removed before the game's final release. A fully functional feature that allowed the player to name their mother. This function was included in the data of the
What? Okay, that doesn't sound more realistic because most people didn't name their own mother. Usually, it's the other way around.
Space World 97 demo of the game, which offers the choice of calling your mother Mother, Mama, Mommy, or the option of giving her the name of your choice.
Oh, that's cute,
Curiosity
actually.
around this data takes place during the demo's Pokemon catching tutorial, however, in which the player's name is copied to the same location in the game's RAM as the mother's name is stored, suggesting that by the time Nintendo had finished creating the game's tutorial, the mechanism of naming the mother was already planned to go unused. Another
And
bit of
then there
interesting
was no
content
mother.
we found within the game's data.
Mommy?
Interestingly, all 26 forms of Unknown have shiny variants, but only the Unknown that are shaped like an I and a V can be shiny. This is, by
What?
complete coincidence, due to both how Unknown forms and shininess are dependent on
An I and a V. Think about this. What else is an IV? That's right, an IV that goes in your arm to give you fluids when you're in a hospital. Who funded Gold and Silver? Big Pharma. The IV to put vaccines into your arms. The only shinies, Unknown, I, and V. Because what they're putting into your arms is unknown. That's right, the vaccines are fake.
on IVs. This means that there
Wake
are
up,
24
sheeple.
forms of Unknown which have unused shiny variants.
We love the Nintendo 64 and its pool of
What do you think about that,
quality
Leo?
exclusives, but not everyone did. Even in its heyday, the system was seen as a misstep by many and was the beginning of the Nintendoom mentality. Many developers shifted away from Nintendo and moved
do you have to say for
instead onto
yourself?
Sony's newest competitor, the PlayStation. This was primarily because Sony's system was substantially easier to work with, and its disc-based games were much cheaper to produce. The PS1 was also seen as more mature, catering to an adult audience who had disposable income, with Sony being more comfortable with adult content like blood or violence in their games.
And sex. No? No sex?
That
Sorry.
isn't to say that the Nintendo 64 didn't have some incredible games, but it was definitely a period when Nintendo were not leading the industry in sales or user mindshare. However, one area Nintendo excelled at in this era was gameplay innovation, and the games they released for the N64 almost always set the benchmark of quality.
Nintendo kind of excels at gameplay innovation now. I mean, they just invented a way for you to play video games on the go with the Nintendo Switch.
In their respective genres. High-octane racing games like F-Zero X and 1080 snowboarding, the birth of 3D platforming in Super Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie, epic adventures like Ocarina of Time, party time classics like Mario Party 2 or Smash Bros, and even
Damn, they really did it all. What is there anything that Nintendo don't
Star
do?
Wars Racer or Rogue Squadron can all be found on the system, and we'll be talking about many of these games in today's episode. We'll start with arguably the most extreme of these games and hit the dusty slopes of 1080 snowboarding, Nintendo's answer to the SSX franchise. 1080 snowboarding has its fair share of cameo appearances, not that surprising for a Nintendo game.
Did they get
The
Tony
game
Hawk on
wanted
it?
to include some of their iconic characters within
That's
the
only
game's
snowboarder I know.
genre, and as such, added their iconic
Or boarder I know.
mascots, Mario and Luigi, among the crowd of spectators within the game. Mario and Luigi can be seen in a fairly realistic depiction, donning their signature colored overalls.
I don't know if you can call this fairly realistic.
They are so incredibly well hidden. A perhaps lesser known character from Nintendo's history also makes an appearance on the Golden Forest track, though this is incredibly easy to miss. Hidden off to one side, watching the player cruise down the mountain, is a man donning what can either be some fishing or hunting gear, alongside his canine companion. This same graphic makes an appearance.
Oh, I love him!
64. These cameos are so...
He's got actual, like, winter gear on in this one, and he's got proper woodland gear in this one. That's good attention to detail. I like that a lot.
It's almost surprising anybody actually wound up noticing them at all. Another well-hidden secret can be found stored away in the data of Super Mario 64. Before the release of the final game, a demonstration was made playable at the Shoshinkai 1995 trade show, an event that would later be renamed Nintendo Space World. Nintendo clearly created a simple level select menu for this event, made ready only a month before the show took place. Normally, data created for the sole purpose of a demo wouldn't be found in the final retail build of a title, but located at the start of the game's text data in all localized versions of the game are the remains of this basic level select. This is a separate level select from a fully functional one created for the purpose of the developers debugging the...
I'm so glad that they didn't do a level select thing in the actual full game and that they went with the proper run around and jump into the paintings. That's so much better. I can't believe how smart they were when they made Super Mario 64. Everything they did was just on point and perfect. They nailed it. They hit it out the park. How did they do it? I don't understand.
With the levels not having their final names, and instead using much earlier ones. These are Mountain, which became Womp's Fortress, Fire Bubble, which became Lethal Lava Land, Snow Slider, which became Cool Cool Mountain, Waterland, which became Dire Dire Docks, and Koopa Number 1, which became Bowser in the Dark World. The N64 also had some top-notch third-party titles. These Star Wars video games aren't by any means a bad
Star Wars!
With titles like Episode 1 Racer being fondly remembered. But the game wasn't always going to simply be called Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, but rather Star Wars Episode 1 Pod Racer, as would be a much more fitting title.
Dude,
However,
that looks fast as dick, man.
There was already
they're going speeds.
racing game out at the same time for Windows PCs, published
F1?
by Ubisoft.
No, F1.
Planet of Death, which
Planet of Death. Jesus Christ, what a bloody name.
abbreviated to POD for the North American market. With
Pods?
this, Ubisoft had actually trademarked the word pod in any form of interactive entertainment. So the team behind Episode 1 Racer decided to play it safe and turn Episode 1 Pod Racer to just...
I hate trademarks. Just let them do it. What do you mean Planet of Death is pod?
Episode
Come on,
1
man.
Racer.
Let Star Wars do its
title
thing.
On the Nintendo 64 was Rogue Squadron, which released before the film's Episode 1 prequel. But this didn't stop the team from inserting some secrets that wouldn't be seen by players, and even
Bro, when does
chunk of
this
the
take
game's
place?
development staff until after the Phantom Menace's release.
Is this
By entering
Tatooine?
the password Halifax ? And then ! Ingve ! While also ignoring the incorrect password entry noises, it's possible to unlock and play as a Naboo starfighter from the Phantom Menace.
That is sick, but also that was before Episode 1 even came out. So you could have gotten spoiled for the movie by putting in a wrong password that gives you the wrong password sound and then just going for it anyway? How is anyone supposed to figure this out? I do miss the day of passwords, though. I miss the day of cheat codes. I miss the day of up, down, left, right, A, B, start, select. I miss all that, man.
Having been published 6 months before the prequel, the code had to be kept secret, only being revealed to the public after the film was released. As for the
You think there's
second
anyone
code
that
of
found
this
it out
album,
beforehand?
Ingve,
By themselves?
This was taken from the Swedish musician Ingve Malmsteen. If anybody knows why this is, however, we're all ears, as this seems like an entirely random choice. From pod racing to a different kind of futuristic racing, it's time to talk
Jesus
about
Christ.
F-Zero X. The Giga Leak of 2020 revealed a whole lot of
Giga Leak, I
weird
can't get over
data
that, man.
for a
It's so
good
funny.
bundle of Nintendo games, but one of the things revealed from this leak is related to F-Zero X. 2 pictures can be found within a set of early graphics for the title, which seem entirely unrelated to Nintendo, never mind the F-Zero series. The first of these images is of Beavis.
Is that
from
Beavis
the
and Butthead?
animated show
It
Beavis
is.
and Butthead. Specifically,
Jesus
the
Christ.
head of a 1998 More Action Collectibles toy of the character. The
What does
second
that do
image
to the
is
game?
simply the same as the first one, slightly enlarged, and with its colors inverted.
Oh, they probably use that for, like, you know, game programming purposes. Sorry, I'm just trying to act smart.
If anything is going to scream the 90s at you, it's not only Beavis and Butthead, but also an image that uses the fancy new
I've not
visual
seen a
effects
single
of
episode of
inverted
this.
color.
I was a South Park boy till I die. I remember in the playground of this school, I have a core memory deep within my soul where I sat on a hill with 2 of my friends, and one of my bust out his phone, and this was one of those old phones, one of those old bricks, but you could play a video on it. It was new age technology that you could just play a video on, and he'd save the video on his phone of one clip of South Park where Cartman keeps saying fuck in the classroom, and I died. I thought it was the funniest thing. I thought this was peak comedy. Cartman just says fuck over and over again in his classroom, and the teacher's like, come on, man, stop doing that. I was throwing up my guts laughing. It was like the pinnacle of what laughter could achieve in human.
But even the final build of F-Zero X has a hidden secret within its data that can be used with the help of an additional piece of hardware, a DYKG favorite, the Nintendo 64 DD Expansion Kit. By attaching this expansion to the N64 console and playing F-Zero X, a completely unique musical track will play on the Rainbow Road level. This is a specially
It's Africa
proposed
by
alternative
Toto.
arrangement of the Mario Kart 64 Rainbow Road theme. Glorious.
Oh, this slaps. Wait a minute.
Now, this
Okay,
next
that
piece
kinda-
is
that goes
so
hard, man.
quintessentially British that it couldn't come from anywhere but Rare.
Oh yes, I love quintessentially British things. So we're gonna get tea and biscuits. Or we're gonna get a little bit of fish and chips on that.
Hilda
Let's go.
is the primary antagonist of the Banjo-Kazooie series, but the origin of her full name may escape many. Gruntilda Winky Bunyan. The Gruntilda portion comes
Winky
from the series
Bunyan?
composer Grant Kirkhope, who
What a
would
legend.
sometimes
This guy is a legend of gaming. He has composed for so many games, and he's like a legend. He's one of those old like wise men that live in the hills that the protagonist of a movie goes to visit to receive the knowledge that they need to defeat the villain.
referred to as Grunt instead of Grant. Simply slapping a tilde on the end for a more feminine name makes sense. As for Winky Bunyan, a surname that is only revealed during the boss fight in Banjo-Tooie, some Brits may have already clocked the name. This name is based on British slang for both a penis and a wart, respectively. Winky and
I've never heard anyone say Bunyan before. Isn't that American? I've only heard Americans say Bunyan. But I've heard Winky
Despite
many
this
times.
fact, however, the game was still given an E rating by the ESRB, perhaps having missed the rather crass reference. Rare seemed to enjoy the term Winky around the
Is he using a
office,
gun?
as they
Is he in a
would
tank?
even sometimes refer to Steve Malis as Winky Boy. Another secret nod to the team can be found
Willy
in
and Winky
Banjo-Tooie,
both means
where the
penis.
combination
Yeah.
code to obtain the Jiggy belonging to Super Stash the Safe in Cloud Cuckoo Land's central cave is 1984, a number which the safe describes as a rare date. This is in
1984. Oh yeah, I remember that. That's when we lost our liberties, brother. That's when Big Brother government took away our rights. I read the book 1984. I know what happened then. We need to fight for our freedoms,
Rare
goddammit.
date and references the year Rare as a company was founded, 1984.
Chat, 1984 is when I time out chat members for spamming. That's
Mario
1984.
Party 2 has a huge number of references to not just pop culture, but even real-life culture sprinkled throughout. If the player refuses Wiggler's hootenanny offer, she will say, "Y'all come back now, you hear?" A much-quoted line.
Hearing a British person try to say that is so funny. I've always said the British version of y'all is use. You say use in the UK. At least we do in Northern England. But saying y'all as a British person sounds so wrong. Even me saying it now, it's like my body is trying to reject it, but it is a really good word. You all, it's great.
In the TV series,
It's the
Beverly
one of the greatest
Hillbillies.
things Americans have done is create y'all.
Take your shoes off. Y'all come back now. Here.
Woody the Tree's Japanese name is also a reference, being Kinocchio, originating from the word ki, meaning tree, and Pinocchio, the famous story of a living wooden boy. This isn't the only famous old story referenced, such as with the Japanese name for the skeleton key, where it is called Akazuki-chan, which effectively translates into Little
Japanese
Key
sounds so
Riding
cool.
Hood. Akazu,
Little Key
meaning
Riding
do not
Hood or Akazuki-chan? Japanese is so
open,
sick.
Ki, meaning
Such a good language.
key, and Akazukin, meaning Little Red Riding Hood. In terms of references to the real world, the menu icon for the Mystery Land board seems to resemble the
Sigilif?
Condor figure found at the Nazca lines.
Condor,
a collection
yeah,
of
no,
ancient
that's what I thought.
geoglyphs carved into the soil of the Nazca Desert, located in southern Peru. The Boo Bell may also be a reference to the practice of burying the dead with a bell tied to a piece of string, which would
This
be
is
tied
so
to the
demented.
cadaver with the bell kept above ground. This was so that if somebody was buried alive, they'd be able to ring the bell, and the gravekeeper would have been able to set them free.
How is that such a common occurrence where you need to think of a workaround for it? If someone is buried alive, that you attach a bell to it, why don't we just think of some other solution that's just, let's not bury the living people to begin with. Is their heart still beating? Are they breathing? Maybe we leave them out and not bury them yet for like a few days. We don't have to bury them immediately, right? This is such a common practice. How would they even know? The only way that you could know if you buried someone alive is if you dig up the body, open the casket, and find like the claw marks of someone trying to get out on the top of the casket. My biggest fear in the entire world is being buried alive. I watched the Mr. Beast video where he is buried alive for 50 hours and had an aneurysm and died.
And
I'm
of
so
course,
scared of this
another
possibility.
N64 classic is Super Smash Bros. Goddamn, Smash is amazing, and nobody would have guessed how big this franchise would have become based on this first title. This initial entry into the franchise crossover series established Mario's fighting moveset, including a variety of special moves. These moves are based on the Shoto style of fighting game character, the general all-rounder, but more specifically than that, his primary selection of special moves.
Dude, these Yoshi are
all in
getting
reference
destroyed. What's
to
going on?
Ryu from Street Fighter. Mario's attacks mirror
Stop abusing
those
the
of
Yoshi.
Ryu, such as his Hadouken-like fireball attack with his neutral special, a jumping uppercut similar to Shoryuken in his up special, or a spinning tackle similar to
So Mario is Ryu!
Yaku in his down special, the Mario Tornado. Mario's moves would evolve and adapt to be less Shoto-esque as the Smash game franchise went on, but alongside this, Ryu himself would also go on to be added into the Smash series, making his debut in Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 3DS and Wii U.
It's been almost 40 years since it was introduced, but the NES
Mario.
People can't
They were the
get
same
enough
character
of
the whole
fresh
time.
ideas that were born in the 8-bit era thanks to Nintendo's incredibly well-planned system, with its, at least for the time, developer-friendly approach to creating games. Their own titles during this era are some of the most iconic franchises to this day, and for good.
There's something that hits different about the old pixel graphics that you just don't get nowadays. Even if they try and make a pixel game, it's just not the same. The old pixel graphics are like, there's something weird and special about them.
Reason. With their
don't get that anymore.
deceptively simple appearance, refined with a ridiculous volume of polish, games like Kid Icarus, Zelda, Mother, Kirby, Super Mario Bros. 3, these have all made an impact. These are titles that many
Yeah, Nintendo really did not miss back in the day, did they? They just did hit after hit. To be fair, they kind of don't miss now. With a lot of their games they're releasing, all the main series Mario game, has there been a bad main series Mario game? The worst one's like, what, maybe Sunshine, critically? And I love Sunshine. They really, and Kirby is always hitting as well. Zelda's always hitting. They just
would
don't
happily
miss.
pick up and play at any time of day just to get a short burst of simple and pristine fun.
Is that Sonic?
And we'll be discussing these games in this episode, as well as more, revealing secrets in games that are older than most of our audience and us, since we're all young and ever so handsome, obviously. But first off, we're going to start with some good old-timey
yes, I agree.
Super Mario Bros. 2. This second entry of Super Mario Bros. Recognized one element of what made the original Super Mario so great: its horizontal screen scrolling, a revolutionary and truly fundamental mechanic. For the second entry, Nintendo didn't want to have just horizontal screen scrolling, but also vertical scrolling, introducing a whole new way and a whole new dimension.
Wasn't this the Mario that was actually the bootleg game that was reskinned to a Mario game, but it was like proper bootleg? I think people didn't like this Mario game. Didn't I just say that Mario never missed? And I'm just saying this is the Mario game that nobody actually
in
liked.
which the player must navigate the bizarre
This is the
scenery
bootleg
of the
one, right?
game. To make it clear that this was a new feature of the game, the first screen in which the player takes control immediately
Doki Panic,
drops
that's
them
it.
from a door into a falling state, so the player can easily recognize that falling off the bottom of a screen may not result in immediate death. But this does introduce a question, one to which there'd been no answer, but remained in the minds of many players. If the player's character is falling out of the sky, out of a door, what is on the other side of that door? This is a question that would have been
Is this like the Schrodinger's door question? Am I supposed to write down my answer and show my working?
impossible to answer around the game's release on
If Mario goes through one door and then he picks up 2 power-ups, but leaves one and then goes through 2 more doors, how many power-ups does he have
the
left?
NES, because there was no method of landing in front of the door or opening it. That is until the modern age of reverse engineering and modifying old game code. If a solid platform is hacked into the game, just below the door, before, and the player attempts to enter it, a shocking result occurs. The player will respawn back to where they started, though the hacked
How does this work?
will be removed, forcing progress to take place. This isn't just true
Forcing progress to take place. Bit ironic coming from Japan.
the original NES release of the game, however, but also true for the Game Boy Advance release. From one Nintendo classic to another, and this time, rather than answering a question, it's a hidden feature that was overlooked by many players of this cult franchise, Kid Icarus.
I can't believe this is what Kid Icarus looked like.
Pit to actually haggle with shopkeepers to lower the prices of the store's items.
Oh, that's so cool. I love the idea of haggling. I think that's such a cool concept that we should use more.
This is done through the use of the second controller attached to the NES system.
I wish you could haggle in the UK. There are some countries where you can haggle with people. You go to a shop and it's like, they're like, £2.50. And I'm like, £1.50. And they're like, £2, no lower. And I'm like, a deal. I wish you could do that in the UK. It just seems fun.
By simultaneously pressing both the A and B buttons. For the Japanese Famicom release, the secret is even more obscure. The microphone built into the system's second controller is used instead of pressing A and B, with players
There's a microphone in that?
into the mic to haggle. The main catch to haggling in the game is that the price of items will only be successfully lowered if Pit's offensive strength is 1 point higher than the first number of the stage that he is currently on when attempting to haggle. So having 2
That's
points
such
of
a
strength
cool
when haggling
feature.
on stage 1, for example, would lead to a good result.
That's so cool. I want to bet that most of the people that played this game had no idea this was even a
If
thing.
this condition isn't met, the shopkeeper will of course raise the price of the items instead. However, these prices will not change until the shopkeeper's text has finished scrolling across the screen, so there will be a small window of opportunity to still get the item at the right price before he tries to gouge you. This feature was even introduced into the 3DS Classics port, where
That's such a
instead of using
cool
a
feature.
non-existent second controller, the player can haggle using the A button and pressing either Start or Select. Some NES secrets don't just appear within the game themselves, but within the instruction manuals. Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, had a curious situation when it was published in France.
It didn't work. The whole game just didn't work. Wasn't the Zelda quite glitchy? And this is pretty much like the worst Zelda. Everyone collectively comes together and says, nah, we don't like this
actually
one.
Receiving a translation
We don't classify
into
this as our
French,
boy.
At least not fully. Instead, the game was published entirely in English, but with a translated manual.
I do
and
like
an
the
additional
aesthetic, though.
secondary booklet, which translated most of the game's text. Pretty rough for kids back in the day, who would spend half their time looking at the screen and half the time staring at the book just to know what the villagers were saying, even if what they say is massively confusing, like the classic "I am error" situation. And this wasn't the only time a game was published in France
Me
without
too.
an in-game
Error, me
localization.
too.
In fact, many NES games were released in Europe only in English, and sometimes they didn't even have a translation manual. Another interesting game on the NES is Star Tropics.
Imagine being a 6-year-old child and getting The Legend of Zelda, being proper excited, then realizing that you can't understand any of the game. You open the manual and the manual is also in the wrong language. So you just get depressed and start walking into a wall for 13 hours until eventually you understand that you're supposed to use the pineapple to go to the Star Destroyer and insert it backwards. Of course you were supposed to do that. It's in the manual.
Both this game and its sequel were exclusive to the West, never having a release in Japan. And the second game only made it to Europe thanks to the Wii U Virtual Console.
Whoa,
The
what
NES release of the first game actually
Are we just gonna ignore the big belly on that fella? What was that? Is that gameplay? What the hell is that
included a
about?
letter inside the game's packaging from the in-game character Dr. Jones. This is the basis of one of the biggest hurdles of kids back in the day. During the events of the game, Dr. Jones will tell you to dip the letter into water, though many assumed that this was a reference to an in-game item. You can imagine the confusion this caused as a result. The player actually needed to physically dip the letter
I would
included in
never
the
figure
box
that out. I
into
am way
water
too small-brained.
in order to reveal a secret code written in invisible ink, something which many players would be reluctant to do.
That is so cool, but no one's gonna do that. Everyone knows that you don't mix water and letters. No one would do that. That is really sick,
Pretty
though.
sure we would all be too. This led to Nintendo Power getting involved, where they published the code that the player was supposed to take from this letter, 747, in their Counselor's Corner section, which was created to help players who got stuck in games. For the game's digital release on the Wii Virtual Console, this of course became impossible, so the code was instead added to the game's manual, which displays a short animation of the letter being dipped into a bucket before revealing the code. On the Wii U, the animation was removed, and it was simply explained that the original release involved physically dipping a letter, and the Nintendo Switch release just doesn't include any digital alternative, and as a result, makes progressing impossible without having to look online.
Okay, well, that's just the standard for every game nowadays, is that sometimes you just won't be able to progress unless you look stuff up. So that's, I would say, lore-friendly. That makes more sense.
Curiosity involves an item which features in the game, the Island Yo-Yo. This name was met with some complications over the years as a result of the word yo-yo being copyrighted in Canada. This meant that the item needed to be renamed when it came to a digital release, so it was changed to the Island Star in order to avoid any infringement.
It's clearly not a star. How is it just copyrighted in Canada? What's going on in Canada with yo-yos?
Sequel, Zoda's Revenge, Star Tropics 2. When the player finds the pizza delivery person in the middle of the desert in the game's third chapter.
That's a crazy sentence. When the character finds a pizza delivery man in the middle of the desert. It's like the Krusty Krab pizza episode all over again.
Riding a turtle which strongly resembles a Koopa Trooper from the Super Mario series. Quite a sly homage, if you ask us. One game with an interesting international story is Mother, the game that came before the massively popular Earthbound. This title originally only saw a release in Japan, but a US release was intended at one stage, with localization work having been completed to remove content unsuitable for the West, and translating the game's text into English.
All I see online about Ness or Mother is that people keep crying about Mother 3, specifically. There's always someone crying about Mother 3. Always, constantly. I mean, there's always someone crying about something on Twitter, but Mother 3 is the most crying. Everybody always crying about Mother 3.
14 years after the Japanese release of the game on the Famicom, Nintendo re-released the game in Japan alongside Earthbound in the Mother 1 and 2 compilation for the Game Boy Advance. Though this Japanese exclusive release is a curious one, because the version of Mother included on the cart was actually the then unreleased American NES localized version of the game, which had then been translated back into Japanese. We know this because of the censorship changes made to the game, as well as the addition of a new ending.
They took the American localized version and translated that version back into Japanese? Why are you just creating problems for yourself?
At least 2 Japanese fans. That was included in the then unreleased English version. Another change is that the movement on the game's overworld is not tile-based, and instead allows for more fluid movement similar to Earthbound, as well as the smash icon having its palette fixed, stopping it from taking on the colors of whatever
that is bright flashy lights. Jesus. Glad there was a warning there.
The Sing command is only usable in the final battle of the game, while in the original, the player could use it in any battle so long as Nintendo's party had already sung the 8 melodies to Queen Mary. One more NES title that had regional differences is Little Nemo, the Dream Master. This revolutionary title let the main character ride a reptile months before Super Mario World even released.
Is that why it was revolutionary? Because it could let you ride a lizard? I mean, to be fair, I'd love riding a lizard. That'd be sick.
Gave players a choice on which creature they'd mount.
Ooh, wow, that's a sentence and a half. Jesus, which creature would you mount, guys?
The rideable creatures in the game is Gorilla.
Is that Donkey Kong?
Which appears to be a perfectly normal gorilla in the North American.
Bro, he just went straight on arse up. He didn't think about it. He immediately, there was not even a frame of animation translating that. He went immediately face down, arse up, like frame 1. That's crazy.
European versions of the game. In the Japanese game, however, this gorilla quite likes to smoke the odd cigar. The character Flip would also smoke cigars.
Why is smoking so accepted in Japan?
But the 2 characters had to give up their habit for their international debut. Despite
it's good,
this,
I'm happy
however,
for them. Quitting is good.
The manual in Western regions still features artwork of the gorilla and a smoking cigar.
No, it's just a lollipop. Trust me, ask Sanji.
Still has curled lips as if it were holding the cigar in its mouth. Speaking of alterations to a game, Kirby's Adventure has an absolute ton of content that was cut before the game received its release. According to the Kirby's Dream Collection celebration
Kirby with a knife?
booklet, a number of ideas were removed from the game entirely, which would have seen the player able to dig holes, turn invisible, multiply, and even turn...
I love Kirby so much, and I still haven't played one of the games. I need to break that one day. Which game should I play? What's my first Kirby game that I should play?
A puddle of water. Most of these ideas never made it past the initial planning and sketching phase, though an unused ability does appear to still be in the game's data. The graphics for a mini Kirby can be found, which would suggest that the game was set to allow the player to become tiny, similar to an ability
Tiny Kirby?
would appear
Forgotten
in
Lands?
later
Is that a long one?
Kirby series, Kirby and the Amazing Mirror. Because of where these graphics are found in the NES
Look at
game's
him!
data,
Is that
it's
Jigglypuff?
speculated by many that this ability wound up being replaced by the UFO ability. More unused graphics can even be found showing an unused 7th stage door, suggesting that there is an original plan to have 7 stages in at least one of the game's main hubs. Though
Thank
in
you,
the
JD.
final release, the most stages a hub area contains is 6. Oddly, one piece of unused data is technically still used in the final release. There was
Sorry, my mind is completely broken. I can't hear the words "one piece of data" without just thinking about One Piece, and then I just start thinking about the pirate rap. Get this stuck in my head.
Give it up so low. Don't give it up now, man. Don't give it up, give it up, give it up, give it up, give it up.
Dude, I love the pirate rap so much. Oh my god. I'm too deep. I'm in too deep. I caught up.
Kirby was on a cannon. And while it was cut from the game for its original purpose, the cannon icon can still be seen when using the mix ability. During the roulette section of abilities, the cannon icon can still be seen, though it's unlikely any real human would have noticed this without the use of frame-by-frame advancement.
I would notice
Though,
it.
as a slight curiosity, for some reason this icon takes on its original purpose in only the French release of the game, and nobody knows why.
Why
And
do
now
the
it's time for
French
some
get the
trivia
nice stuff?
from the NES game that we get asked about the most by far, Super Mario Bros. 3. You may already know that the whistle sound effect in the game comes from The Legend of Zelda. But this isn't the only
Does
audio
it?
reference in Mario 3. The Tanuki
Did it just
Mario
yoink the sound
transformation
effects?
sound effect actually originates from the mysterious Murasame Castle.
Dude, they're yoinking sound effects! The Zelda team must be pissed. Actually, this is not even the Zelda
And
game.
only Nintendo game made with the same engine as the original Legend of Zelda and released 2 full years before Mario 3. There's a great region-long video on that. It's
I
the
can't
first
believe
one I
Mario
ever
would
did
yoink like
if you
that.
wanna
Mario's a
cringe at
thief?
an old voiceover. Another
Lock
secret
that
in the
man
game
up. He's
is
not
that
safe to
for
be haved
some
around.
reason, the hammer suit item that pops out of a large question block appears to actually be a toad suit. The other items, the frog and tanuki suits, actually match their inventory sprites, so several sleuths have posed the question, why is one different and not matching? Though it was fixed in the Super NES and Game Boy Advance remakes. It's worth noting that in the original game, the hammer suit is something of a secret power-up, as it only shows up in hidden areas and randomly from toad houses.
Because it's so overpowered. Are you kidding me? He just throws hammers. He just goes absolutely hog wild throwing hammers. I maintain that Mario gets high on shrooms and throws hammers, and then when he dies, it's just him getting arrested by the police for throwing hammers at people.
Though in later versions, it is made to consistently appear in certain toad houses. This could be why the outfit appears to be a toad when small, but even this seems a bit
swear, Mario's just
nonsensical
insanely
since all
high
the other
constantly.
small suit sprites match their larger suit sprites. So
He's just running
yeah,
around New
it's a
York,
mystery.
causing havoc.
It was a simpler time back in the mid-2000s. If things were tough, you could just reach over for the perfect tool to help you de-stress, playing Nintendogs on the Nintendo DS.
No, this didn't work for me because I had much more of a Northern English / Scottish accent back at the time. So whenever I'd say sit, it wouldn't understand. It never registered anything I was saying. It just didn't understand. You had to speak with an American accent or you wouldn't be able to play it. They classed out Scottish people from being able to play Nintendogs, and I've never forgiven Nintendo for
This
that.
compact bad boy boasted 2 screens, that's twice as many as a television in case you didn't know, and it could even fold for supreme portability. The console wasn't exactly pushing graphics to the next level, but that wasn't what was needed when you had games designed around the system's unique features, or games that were just designed to be great. Mario Party and Kart DS, Nintendo
I wonder if other game developers have ever considered that concept of just making good Vimeo games, and then they will sell well because they are good games.
Dogs and the DS Zelda
thinking
titles
emoji.
certainly use the system's unique qualities, but then Chrono Trigger or Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, not so much. And that doesn't mean they aren't bloody brilliant. For our first piece of trivia, we're going to be taking a look at a game that made a little bit less of a splash than the rest of these, despite still being pretty decent. Glory of Heracles. This title
The hell is
part
that?
of a series,
I thought it was
but
Fire
this
Emblem.
release is the only one to be published outside of Japan. Originally
Bro
owned
needs
by
armpit
Data
armor.
East and sold off after the company filed for bankruptcy, the franchise was bought by both Nintendo and Paon, co-owning the copyright between them. This meant that the game was able to introduce some fun references to other Nintendo titles. Just like when the game's hero is trying to come up with an alias for himself, where one of the names suggested for him is Pit, in reference to Kid Icarus.
And they
Though
said, no,
this
Pit's a
quote
fucking
doesn't
stupid
even
name.
sound Greek, so it is dismissed. Another reference pops up in the forest where an earth nymph will say, hee hee, this path, it's secret to everybody, referencing the popular phrase from the Zelda series. And when the town of Heaven's Haven is destroyed, talking to an item shopkeep, she will respond, buy something and support my rebuilding plans, will ya? Another Zelda nod.
Buy what, bro? You've got no goods. Buy some buy some ash, please. You want some charcoal? Got loads of
The
that.
phrase, buy something will ya, spoken by the merchant in Zelda 1. Another nod can be found when the party attempts to sneak aboard the Trantian giant horse headed for Troy, and Princess Piazza will
Oh, it's a proper Trojan horse. That's so sick. They made a DS game that's a JRPG about ancient Greek myths. Why have I never heard of this before? That sounds so good. That sounds really fun. Why did no one buy this? Why did I not buy? Well, I didn't hear about it. Maybe it was just the marketing. Maybe they had no advertisement.
Party passage on board. I am Princess Piazza, representative of Trantia's ally nation of, Arcania. The name
What? Did you say she's Princess Pizza? That's a dumb name.
is actually the homeland of Marth from Fire Emblem. Nintendo loves referencing their other games, but it isn't too often that they reference their literal selves, the people behind the company and the games. In Nintendogs, however,
God, I love
when
Nintendogs
walking a
so
dog,
much.
It's possible to bump into a random dog walker named Shiggy and his dog Pick.
Miyamoto?
As you might have guessed, this is actually Shigeru Miyamoto, along with his
Aw.
real-life dog, Piku, which makes this reference rather sweet and a bit meta in some ways,
That's
as Pick
so
was
cute.
actually the inspiration for the whole game's creation. Before
God, Nintendogs is so good. Why did they not make a sequel to
Spirit
this?
Tracks, there was of course another Zelda on DS, Phantom Hourglass. References to earlier Zelda titles can be found throughout the game, including the character of King Muto, who shares his name with Muto, the carpenter boss from Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and the Minish Cap. Not only that, but the other carpenters from these games and the Cobble Knights from Phantom Hourglass are very similar. Bremor, Brent, Doyle, and Mac in Minish Cap, Bremure, Brant, Doylan, and Max in Hourglass. There's more interesting secrets behind the characters' names in Phantom Hourglass, though sometimes these might not be so obvious. Bellum is the main antagonist of the game, a squid-like creature, while Linebeck,
What the fuck? That's like a tentacle gone wrong.
captain of the SS Linebeck steamboat, serves as a companion to Link to guide him through the world. At one
He's
stage
evil.
in the game,
He's gotta be evil. He
Linebeck
looks
becomes
evil.
possessed and must be defeated.
Fucking knew it. I knew it, dude. Pre-watched, man. I've never played a Zelda game before in my life. I took one look at him. He's evil. Got
It
to
is
be.
this possessed form that has an unseen name, referred to as Bellumbeck in the game's official guide. Though the name can also be found within the game's code, suggesting it is in fact his name in this state, but the developers simply forgot to insert the boss's name when the battle begins. Bellum is actually an interesting character alone, particularly his relationship with the
Bro,
Ocean
he just
King.
went arse up as well. Bro is ready for something. What's going on, man?
Between them may be a reference to the natural conflict between
Laboon.
sperm whales and squid, with Bellum taking the appearance of a squid, while the Ocean King's true form being that of a
Kid.
whale. Some
Whale.
of the
No,
DS
that's right.
sports introduced intriguing new elements, be them intentional or not, like with Chrono Trigger, which made one particularly challenging element of the game slightly easier, thanks to what is likely a bug. Towards the end of the game, the player can choose to battle the Dream Devourer.
What
found
is
at the
that?
Darkness at the end of time.
Nope.
A boss which boasts a staggering 32,000 hit points.
Nah, it's fine. Just hit it with a few potions. You'll be alright. Just get some +5 attack spells. Yeah,
However, this invokes a slight oddity, as the game's HP value is stored in the code as a 16 signed integer, meaning that it cannot be any higher than 16 bits, with one of those bits indicating the sign of the number it represents. This is a little complicated if you don't know about how computers calculate number values, but suffice it to say, it's possible to wreck this boss by helping him out, and the game won't know what to do.
Oh, so if you give it too much health, it will overflow and go back to 0, right? Is that going to be
After
right?
fighting this boss and getting past the first phase of the battle, the second phase initiates with the Dream Devourer absorbing magic, resulting in magic damage, healing the boss rather than harming it. This is where the tech brain comes into play. By making the boss soak up an absolute ton of healing, giving it more health than it initially started with, it's possible to push the boss's health above 32,767. The
which will then cause it to overflow and reset to 0, meaning that you got too much of a good thing and died. I love programming. It's so dumb.
Maximum HP limit in the game. This results in the game's health count being above its limit, and so it will overflow and loop back to the beginning again. This means
See, this is why I did my degree in computer science, so that when I react to videos about really old games, I can somewhat badly explain to you what is going to happen before the person in the video explains to you what is going to
the
happen.
boss will ultimately
This is why I
heal
spent
up
3
past
years
the
doing
upper
computer
limit
science.
and breach the lower limit, healing to a negative number. As the boss is then read as having less than 0 health, the battle will end, and the boss will be determined as dead. Though we suppose it's more like,
That's so funny. Imagine the characters being like, "Don't worry, we believe in the good of you. Let me heal you and help you." And they're like, "No, stop healing. No, I'm getting too much health. No, my integer's about to overflow. I'm overflowing. No,
more
I'm overflowing."
alive than it can handle. Staying on the subject of great DS games that don't make too much use of the DS's unique features, there's a fairly refined secret within Mario Kart DS that was never used, though it can be reinserted. The code in question can be found in the game and re-enabled through the use of a cheat code, which utilizes display capture and blurs the player's screen whenever they use a boost to give the illusion of speed. The final game does
The illusion of
try to
speed, 'cause they
enable
didn't know how to
this
make you
effect,
actually
but
go
because
fast.
the blur doesn't initialize, it winds up not being displayed. The code makes use of a coprocessor utilized in the game's multiplayer modes, so while it can be enabled, it is unlikely that the code would have worked in anything other than single-player modes.
I hate that blur.
Why
It
the
looks
code
so
went
gross.
unused is unknown, but inconsistency across single-player and multiplayer modes would have been a contributing factor.
I really wish they didn't put motion blur in like any video game. I hate it so much. I always turn it off whenever I have the opportunity on any game. It just makes me feel
Along
gross.
with the fact that it could have been considered too distracting. More references can be found in another Mario game on DS, Mario Party DS. This time around, the reference can be found in the minigame Goomba Wrangler, and is a nod to another game created by Nintendo, Pokemon Ranger, a spin-off
when's the sequel coming out?
Pokemon series. The
When's
game involves
the
the
sequel
player
coming out?
drawing circles around Pokemon to capture them, similar to Goomba Wrangler. The French name for this minigame actually serves as a fairly on-the-nose reference to Pokemon Ranger, with it being called
Goomba Ranger.
Another interesting part of the European release of the game came with the website which listed the game's various boards. Wiggler's Garden was given a different name, being listed as P.T. Piranha's Greenhouse. While this original name may
It's not a
appear to
greenhouse
make
though,
sense
is it?
with it featuring a piranha plant at the top of the board, it falls short when you realize that P.T. Piranha doesn't actually appear in the game at all. Never mind the fact that the board is clearly based on a guy.
No, you don't understand. This is PT Piranha. He does not need to be in the game because he is the owner of the capital. He owns the place. He does not have to physically be there. He does not have to physically make any kind of effort or work towards this map because he owns the capital of the map, meaning that he gets the profits and the excess labor value extracted from those working on the map.
Garden and really doesn't look like a greenhouse. And now we make our way to the inevitable, talking about Pokemon for a Nintendo handheld. Heart Gold and Soul Silver are some much beloved entries in the franchise, and with them came a number of new Pokemon designs, some of which were never actually seen. One of the designs that does appear is a spiky-eared Pichu, which requires the player
That was
to have
never
obtained
used?
a Pikachu-colored Pichu from an event in a copy of Pokemon Diamond or Pearl, and then trade it to Heart Gold or Soul Silver as to unlock a unique event. But this spiky-eared Pichu was originally supposed to be a white variation of Pichu, but this was changed during development thanks to Shoko Nakagawa, the Japanese
No, the white one is so cool looking though.
voice actress for Spiky Pichu. In her autobiography titled
Oh, I mean, listen, she can do no wrong. She knew exactly what she was doing. She had a great idea, great head on her shoulders. She made the correct decisions. I fully respect everything that she did and
Shoko
all the mistakes.
Nakagawa.
I mean, all the correct things that she definitely did.
Pokemon taught me the meaning of life, Nakagawa claims. So originally, spiky-eared Pichu
So
was
true,
going
yeah.
to be white Pichu instead. And I heard they were even thinking about making a brand of white cream stew to go along with it and everything. But they
Yeah.
eventually went with spiky-eared Pichu instead. The
Definitely
white
better-
stew
better
in
idea.
question was likely a product to sell as a pun on White Pichu's Japanese name, as it sounds very similar to white stew, Hawaito Pichu and Hawaitu Sichu. The change from a white
You know, the commentator was trying to be very careful in that scenario. God, I wish I was that game.
Pichu to a spiky Pichu, however, is the result of Nakagawa often making a spelling mistake in her blog. Where
No. She doesn't make a spelling mistake. The spelling itself is incorrect.
accidentally used the word spiky like she is saying spiky happy instead of mega happy, inspiring Game Freak to use this concept for Pichu and
Such a
have
lucky
Nakagawa
Zamcenter.
be the voice of the new creation.
Whoa.
Did you know?
Sorry,
During
guys,
the
I was-
Wii U's development, possibly none of Nintendo's
distracted
senior
for a
staff
second there.
were aware of how Xbox Live or the PlayStation Network functioned. An unnamed third-party developer told Eurogamer that working with the Wii U prior to launch, and working with Nintendo in general, was a rather trying experience. Nintendo
Oh, really?
had
You think
issues
so?
setting up
You think that maybe working with Nintendo is a trying experience? Yeah, no, I agree. I can see where you come from
large
with that.
network infrastructure like Xbox Live, even after announcing their online platform and its features. The developer explained, "This was surprising to hear. We probed a little deeper and asked how certain scenarios might work with the Me friends and networking, all the time referencing how Xbox Live and PSN achieved the same thing. At some point in the conversation, we were informed that it was no good referencing Live and PSN, as nobody in their development teams used those systems."
That's so funny. They have no idea how their biggest competitors work. They're like, what the hell is an Xbox Live? To be fair, no one plays Xbox in Japan. PlayStation's pretty big, though. They should know about
The
that.
apparent reason for the day one patch on the Wii U was that most of the network features on the OS weren't even on the console yet. Everything regarding the development process leading up to the launch ran slower than expected. Their team received multiple dev kits up until launch, which is standard procedure, but the kits were colored differently and didn't include clear explanations as to how they were different from earlier versions, outside of the obvious hardware adjustments. When issues
They made the development into a mini game. I'm going to give you 3 different colors, and it's your objective to find out which development kit won't sabotage and delete your code. Have fun!
actual-
They turned game development into a saw
game
trap.
of the Wii U arose, they reported to Nintendo support, but the team ended up having to wait around a week to get a reply for each report thanks to time zones and translation issues. The Espresso multi-chip module microprocessor utilized in the Wii U offloads some of the troubles from the CPU onto other chips.
Imagine waiting a week to get a reply that is just a yes or no question. It's like, can I do this with this? They reply and they're like, no, sorry.
But
2
due
weeks
to how
later.
different this was from existing systems like the Xbox 360 and PS3, the team didn't know how to properly make use of the feature and compensate for the underpowered CPU. The Wii U's hardware development cycle was completed in 4
Just once, I really want to see Nintendo pull out an absolute boss man of a game console. I want it to come out and have the most insane graphics processor, power supply, and CPU. I want it to be better than space age technology PCs. I want to see Mario and every single one of his wrinkles rendered in full 8K HD. I want to see every mustachio follicle. I want to see Nintendo go balls to the wall and just murder a games console. Make it the greatest thing that's ever existed. That's what I want one day. But for now, they're just going to be super underpowered, sad.
years, having started just 2 years after the Wii released. The Wii U team experimented with a second screen very early on, before solidifying the concept of the console. They affixed the screen to the end of the Wii Zapper to simulate the screen moving one-to-one with the player's movements. 2 developers who worked on Wii Sports and Resort, Takayuki Shimomura and Yoshikazu Yamashita, were exploring ideas from Wii Sports to find new angles for the Wii U. Shimomura said, "We tested gameplay that involved moving the Wii Zapper and having images from the Wii move in sync on the monitor in your hands. It was fairly well received. The team was almost immediately taken with the concept. Before it could be applied to the Wii U, Miyamoto decided the idea worked best for the 3DS in the form of the built-in gyro sensor for the handheld, which was in the final stages of development at the time. Shimomura added, thanks to this
Did anyone actually use the gyro sensor on the 3DS apart from that one Ultra Sun and Moon mini game where you had to go around the Ultra wormholes like this and everyone realized that it sucked and we went back to using the normal controls instead? I've never found a gyro control that I actually like.
prototype, however, we were able to explain the structure of the Wii U, having a screen in your hands, and it being more compelling. With the Wii Zapper prototype no longer in play, the team moved on to a new prototype model. The model was simply an LCD screen with 2 Wii remotes fixed to either side. Initially, the gamepad's design was much more reminiscent of handheld tablet devices. It featured circle pads instead of analog sticks, and the whole device was flat, opposed to the final design, which has a protrusion on the back and grips on either side. The Wii U's outward appearance was motivated by the same idea of the Wii. This explains the initial minimalistic flat design that made it seem as though it belonged in the living room. Nintendo hardware
God, they
developer
buggered the
Masato
Wii U
Ibuki
so
spoke
bad.
about developing the gamepad. We didn't know how tacking grips on the back of a square pad-like device would make it easier to hold, so we made a bunch of designs. I carved them by hand, adjusted them with clay, did that day after day for a long time.
Oh, he worked so hard on it. I do feel bad for game developers when they release something and it completely flops, because you've got to put your whole bussy into game development. It's so hard to make games and games products. You have to put your entire heart and soul into something, and just seeing it flop must be the worst feeling in the world. Like, it feels bad enough for me when I spend a week or two making a video and that video comes out and that video flops. I can't imagine spending years of my life making one specific thing, putting everything that I am into it, and just having it flop immediately.
Went to have it checked by those involved and got told it was difficult to hold. No matter how perseverant you are, that may break your heart. I thought, come on, this is pretty good, isn't it? But they flat out said it wasn't, so we repeated that process. I think that was the hardest time for me.
They got berated constantly during the development of the Wii U, and then they came back and it flops anyway.
Nintendo made roughly 30 software prototypes for the Wii U while still using the work-in-progress gamepad. The programs ran through 2 Wii consoles, which were used as simulations for the Wii U. These software prototypes led to the idea for a Nintendo theme park, which eventually became one of the Wii U's launch titles, Nintendo Land. Miiverse is a sort of spiritual successor to the Japanese Wii channel called Wii no Ma. The channel was billed as a living room communication channel, which allowed users to shop, watch on-demand video content, and featured a variety of entertainment channels. According to Miiverse director Kiyoshi Mizuki, we updated it every day, but depending on the users on the receiving end, sometimes they would find what we distributed to be interesting, and sometimes it wasn't. So it was very—
Damn, he truly understands how being a YouTuber is. We did it every day, and sometimes nobody looked at it.
challenging to try and satisfy everyone with a limited amount of content we could produce. So instead of making everything ourselves for users to enjoy, we thought that we could maybe set up user-generated content so that more people could participate.
Damn, it's like YouTubers reacting to content. Sometimes, instead of making everything yourself, you'll set up some other user-generated content that you can then react to. It's
Then
kind of
Nintendo
similar.
President Satoru Iwata
So when anyone gets on me for reacting to videos, I'll just say, I'm just copying what Big Brother Nintendo did.
referred to the concept as an empathy network. The entire program was designed to elicit
I hate Donald Trump, he is lame. Wow, the 8-year-olds on Nintendo Land are really ahead of the curve
between
there.
its users. This is why instead of the commonly implemented system of likes used in most social networks, Miiverse uses yes, and the posts are attached to a specific game for the purposes of shared interest.
It's like 8-year-olds got to practice having their soul completely destroyed by social media really early on. Then they grew up and graduated to Instagram and TikTok where they were really finished off.
When you turn on the Wii U, the main screen is called Wara Wara Plaza, but originally it was called Mi Wara Wara. The idea of having Miis come out and bustle around in a crowd, or Wara Wara, came from the 3DS Street Pass Mii Plaza lacking any social experience outside of the actual act of street passing. The developers behind the Dolphin GameCube and Wii emulator reverse-engineered the Wii U gamepad in an attempt to get the Wii U emulator working on PC.
That's an
The
Xbox
editor
controller.
told
What's that
Eurogamer,
doing there?
We started working on the Wii U gamepad as soon as we got our hands on it. The gamepad is actually not a very secure device compared to the Wii U. The device firmware is stored in an unencrypted flash, which allowed us to reverse-engineer the binary code pretty easily. It's also using almost standard 802.11n, which made things easier to experiment on PC.
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know what any of this means, I'll explain this. I'll break this down to you. Wii U hack easy. Get code. Very
We
good.
also found the system can support 2 Wii U gamepads simultaneously. This is actually built into the system's firmware, implying Nintendo were going to use this feature, or at least allow other developers to use it. There are a few fun Easter eggs featured within the Wii U's menus. When game data is transferred from the Wii to the Wii U, the icons
Pikmin.
of the transfer data are carried by Pikmin. The Mii
That's
Maker music
cute.
features the Great Fairy Fountain theme, as well as the theme to Super Mario Bros. 3 Waterland.
Yeah. Okay. Damn. Yeah. It's very serene. That's vibes. Oh, dude, this is so iconic.
On top of this, if you access the Wara Wara Plaza on your birthday, music will play and your Miis will clap for you.
Did
Happy
you also know
birthday!
that the Japanese version of Super Mario RPG
There is someone watching this right now and it's their birthday out there. Happy birthday to you specifically. It's your birthday. Let me know in the comments right now.
has a ton of references to anime, or that there's a hidden secret within Earthbound that took decades to find? For a whole bunch of SNES facts, check out the video on screen.
Maybe I will. That was an hour of Nintendo facts. What did you learn? I learned that the Wii U was insecure. I mean unsecure. And whoever made the spiky head Pikachu, I love her so much and want to marry her. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to suggest a video, join my Subnoodle Discord server. Links in the description.